All right, I think we're live. We're getting there. I like to give it a few minutes. I know it sometimes takes a little bit. I think we're live. People are tuning in. Dun, dun, dun. Technology. All right, Griff, are we ready?
We're ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hi, everybody. We're so glad you could join us today. I am here with one. If there was a male version of me, or I'm a female version of Griff, my soul brother, John Griffith, who shares a passion and love of wildlife, but also connecting people to wildlife like I do. We are so excited to be here with you today during this holiday week, giving thanks for so much, but also for wildlife. And I invited Griff. We do a lot together, but to join me in this talk. As you know, last week I did a talk on the cutest animal in the world, an animal that's really easy to love, the pika. But we're talking about, and Griff and I have had so many discussions about how do you get people to love animals not as adorable or that we consider dangerous. So we thought we'd invite all of you to join us in a discussion on how to do that and how to love wildlife that may not be as cute or accessible. So you're here today. This is a discussion, so we're really looking forward to the comments and the stories, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But first, I know not all of you know both of us, so we're going to introduce ourselves. There's my brother. He is always here. Hi, Kev. Thanks for being here. But let me start with Griff. He's coming to us live from a really beautiful place in California. So Griff, why don't you introduce yourself and tell people where you're at?
Hello, this is Griff, and I'm at the most beautiful place on the planet. Best like Yosemite? No. This is Humboldt Redwood State Park, and it's beautiful. And I'm standing in a dry creek bed, which normally wouldn't be dry this time of year. And I'm eating, let me just go here. And I'm eating bay nuts. I was going to tell you this earlier, Beth. But these are from Umbelleria californica. This is from the bay tree that grows here. So people think about Humboldt redwoods and think we just have redwood trees. But we have lots of different kinds of trees, including these bay nuts. And if you collect them, and they're paleo relics. They're left over from when California was tropical, when the whole world was tropical. They're one of the only two plants that are left over from that era. And they're seeds, when you dry them out for a week and a half and then you roast them, they taste like chocolate and coffee had a baby. Okay. So they're super, super good. I don't know why Starbucks doesn't have these. They are so good. But anyways, that's where I'm at. I'm eating bay nuts in Humboldt Redwood State Park. I'm always in Humboldt Redwood State Park because I love it so much.
And John, you've done, again, just love you, brother. You've done so much in your career, or it's not even a career. For me, I know the same as you, it's a life calling to get people engaged in wildlife. You, for a long time, led California conservation crews on salmon restoration and stuff.
Yeah,
and you're a ranger, but you're also an author, right?
Yep, I wrote Tone of Magic Going Mad, which is a kid's book, which I wrote. The whole reason why I wrote that was because when I became a CDC supervisor, I ran into what we're going to discuss right now. I ran into phobias and fears of animals, snakes, spiders, mountain lions, bears, when I took these young adults, 18 to 25, out into the wilderness or just out into the woods for 8 days at a time, where we would camp next to remote project sites. And so I helped a lot of people overcome their fears to things. And part of the reason why I wrote that book, Totem Magic Going Mad, was to help in this, because this is back in like 2001 or two, maybe a little bit later. When did Richard Louve's book come out? Last Child in the Woods.
Oh,
because
boy.
I remember asking like people like, have you noticed this generation's a little bit trippier or whatever? And then like they're more indoors and stuff. And then pretty soon someone's like, you need to read Richard Louve's book. And I did. And it really helped with connect people to the outdoors, helping them overcome fears, not just to animals, but also to just being in the wild.
Yep. And I think that's important. I think that, we'll get into it. But for me, a lot of it is just overcoming fear, that these fears don't need to exist, or they probably exist for good reason. But, just a little education can help with it. So I've really appreciated that. And so, hey, so many people tune in. I'm so excited. Bob Roney. Hello, Bob. Bob, you have the best pandemic hair. Bob is someone I've learned a lot from. He is a retired from Yosemite, which I think is the most beautiful place on the planet, park ranger, and I learned a lot from him about wildlife over the years. And John just introduced me, or Griff. My name is Beth Pratt, and a lot of you know me as the Cougar Lady in the literal sense. Although, hey, I'll own to the other interpretation of cougar at times. But I have the best job in the world. I am the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation, and I oversee and lead the Save LA Cougars campaign with P22 and to build the wildlife crossing. But I've spent a lifetime working to protect the environment and wildlife. And you will hear my 5 dogs. I'm coming to you from outside Yosemite. I've lived in the foothills of Yosemite National Park, right outside the park, for almost, 22 years now. And it is my love. I love the park. I love looking at pika and being at 12,000 feet. But I also love wildlife in LA, like mountain lions and coyotes. So I've worked in places like Yosemite and Yellowstone and, hiked with grizzly bears and wolves and mountain lions and animals that a lot of people are frightened of. So I do love sharing wildlife and love connecting people to it, even the scary ones. And Tony, who's listening, who is scared of frogs, and it is my life goal to get her over that. She wanted me to make sure I talked about my books. I'm the author of 2 books. One is When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors, and this is a great book, not because I wrote it, but because it's all the good news stories in California about how people are coexisting with wildlife. Again, even admittedly, ones that people sometimes are scared of, like mountain lions. And a big shout out to Angelinos for coexisting with a mountain lion, P22. And then my newest book, which we're going to do a couple journal entries from today, is I Heart Wildlife, a guided activity journal for connecting with the wild world. And this is a great pandemic book, lots of journal entries that'll guide you through how you can forge and explore your deep connection with wildlife. So we'll be talking a little bit about a couple of those activities during the call. But I wanted to get into it. And what we thought we'd start off with, listen, John and I are both scientists. We both work with wildlife. We're out there with wildlife. Like I said, I hike with bears and mountain lions in my yard. John, what are some animals up there you hike with which people might consider scary or dangerous?
Well, hey, Megan Hensley. I am always around bears that I think a lot of people are afraid of, because visitors come here a lot and they ask me, are there bears here? And I'm like, not right here, but maybe like 20 or 30 feet over that way. But there's a lot of bears here, tons and tons of bears here. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with them. There's mountain lions here too. I find their tracks quite a bit. I haven't seen one in this park yet, but definitely seen their signs. And then we have, snakes and all the kind of spiders and everything that people are afraid of usually.
Yep. So you got, yeah. And, I always joke about California. There's not too much here you have to be afraid of, right? There's actually only a couple poisonous animals in the state, which is black widows and rattlesnakes. We just don't have the tons of stuff. Even our scorpions here aren't poisonous. They'll hurt if they bite you. But still, even those of us like John and Griff and myself that work with wildlife, of course, as animals, we, if not scared, at least have a healthy respect for. But I think, and of course, there's just phobias, right? There are animals that you're going to be scared of, even if you know all the facts. And I think that's, to me, what's interesting. And we're each going to start off with telling a story about, excuse me, Captain, my dog is doing weird stuff. We're going to tell a story of an animal that has frightened us, or something that we had to get over, even as biologists and scientists in the wildlife world. And mine is the shark. So let me see if I do this correctly. Mine
is the shark too, by the way. So she's speaking for both of us here.
Yeah. So there, if you can see, did I do it right? Yeah. So great white sharks. Now listen, I love sharks. Okay. I think they're amazing creatures. So it's not that I don't love them, and I think they're awe-inspiring. But when I was a little girl growing up on Cape Cod, we went to see, my parents were pretty good. They didn't take us to see Jaws at the drive-in, but they took us to see, I think, a Disney feature. And then I turned around with my brother, and we watched Jaws, which was which is on the other screen, right? So we was really, we ended up seeing some of the scary parts. So I have a real imprint in my mind as a young girl, not just about sharks, but anything coming at you in the water, I think is something that really challenges me. So I've had to really get over that. And indeed, even when I'm swimming in lakes, we have an annual swim every year that we do in Tenaya Lake in Yosemite. And I still get a little unnerved with the deep water, even though I know there's no sharks. Alpine sharks don't exist. But it really took me a long time to get over this, even knowing the facts. Okay. And as shark attacks, if you are afraid of something, should be, afraid of dying, should be almost last on your list. You should fear step ladders, or you should fear lightning, or, any number of things beyond sharks. Sharks have really gotten a bad rap. And indeed, Peter Benchley felt actually pretty terrible about the effect on people's psyches like mine that his novel and movie Jaws sort of demonized the shark in ways that really have never left us. Now I was lucky enough to get over that being a biologist, but many people haven't. And indeed we get people just slaughtering sharks on sight. I think, that's pretty typical for any predator that scares us or we don't know enough about. We end up, I think out of fear, killing them. And, that to me is really why a talk like this and educating people is so important. There's always the fear and helping people to get over that. But for me, it's always the consequence to wildlife that usually is deadly for them. And as Megan says, I agree with you, Megan. That's what. So, before I pass it to John to tell about his scary animal, sharks are amazing, right? I mean, that's the thing is if you dig into and get past these myths, right? Sharks are amazing creatures. Their teeth are scary, but their teeth are not directed at us. They're made for hunting seals and fish, and they are incredible hunting machines. But as some scientists who work and dive with sharks all the time will tell you, they kind of have the personality of dogs when they're not on the hunt. They like to be scratched, and it's really fun watching the antics. If you don't behave like a fish, they're not going to treat you like one. So, and obviously knowing the times you're in danger with a shark, which is, again, are you behaving like a seal? But shark attacks are so rare. When you think of the millions of people every day that are in the ocean, all over the world, I think less than 100 shark attacks a year, that is nothing. So for me, always with animals, it's about putting the risk in perspective. I think that is key. And there are a million things that are more of a threat to your safety than sharks or other dangerous wildlife. So that's sort of the animal that I will admit to this day, although logically doesn't scare me, that phobia is still a little there. But instead of being scared like I was as a young girl, it's just more a healthy respect and now an appreciation. I just think they're such an incredible creature. I would love to go diving at some point with sharks and see them up close because they're so incredible. But I think that the trick for me is it was learning a little more to dispel that fear is what got me over it. So, John, what was your, I know sharks was a big one for you and I stole it, but what was the animal or the animal still that might give you a little pause, even if you can love it? Again, I love sharks, even though they still give me a little pause.
Well, I just have to add some stuff into the shark thing because I'm Generation X too, and I feel like all of us Generation X people have the same story that you just told. I was supposed to be asleep in the back seat of the car when I was like 5 or 6 for the Jaws movie, but I woke up and they didn't see me and I was peeking over and it scarred me for life. Yes. Like I wouldn't even let mom put bubbles in the bubble bath after I saw that. I wouldn't sit on the toilet if the water was too blue. Remember how they used to put the little blue stuff in the water? Yeah. I would not go swimming. We had in our mobile home park, we had a swimming pool. And if there wasn't 5 other kids that looked like Jaws would eat them first in the pool, I wouldn't go in there. Like it scarred me, creeks, lakes, everything. Like I became super afraid of the water, bubble bath in the, Jaws like worked. Like if someone could make a movie like Jaws that actually helped us to love sharks, man, can you imagine how that would change the world?
We need
But
it. And I put up this, I'm sure for you, this was really it. It actually wasn't the shark itself that scared me. It was scenes like this in Jaws where you're seeing, you know, the under the water, you know, your feet were really vulnerable.
Oh yeah. And there's a study that like we're like, sometimes I talk about my fire ape, my Paleolithic man inside of me that's like, you know, revealing his weird evolutionary psychology. And you know, we are afraid of being predated upon, and there's these studies that are really cool where they show people like sharks and tigers and stuff coming at you, like coming closer and closer, and people are like, ah, and then they get a giant alphabet, like a letter A, a capital letter A, and have the A come at the people, and people are still like, ah. So it doesn't even need to be a tiger or a shark. Just anything that looks like it's going to predate us scares us to death. And so Jaws like did that. It was genius. It was terrible, and I wish I never would have saw it, but it was genius because it was years. In fact, I was in my early 20s doing salmon surveys, and I would be in a big pool, and there'd be like 60 salmon. You know how the mask makes everything look bigger? And I'd be swimming, and I'd be like, oh, that one down there looks really dark. Maybe it's a shark, but I'm in fresh water. I'm in a river. And I would get out of the water for a while and be like, Griff, come on, dude. This is fresh water. It's a salmon. Get back in there, or a sturgeon or something cool.
I know. I'll be swimming and a stick will touch my foot. It's like, ah! You know,
I know.
But yeah, someone, Gabe, thank you. Tony put up, Gabriel said, many of our fears are based on perception and when you can't see through the murky water. I agree. You know, and there's actually a term for fear of things coming at you through water, Gabriel. And it's true. And listen, in some respects, this is a good instinct to have, right, Griff? I mean, when you were someone who didn't live with technology or, you know, live in this age, and you had to go fishing and had to go in murky water, it's probably something, you know, a good, again, respectful thing rather than.
Yeah, you didn't want to be in the water with your spear hunting and be like, I felt something large and scaly go by my ankle. You wanted to be like, ah, get out. Like, that's how you survived.
Right.
So, I get it. And you know what? Jaws played right to that, like instinct in us. But you know, another thing that does is, you know, a lot of things that are venomous do, like spiders, venomous spiders, or just spiders in general. And I had one of those, and that was a learned behavior because I saw the adults in my life freaking out over spiders. And a lot of the adults in my life were immigrants from places that had really dangerous spiders. So they had this exaggerated fear, and everything was a brown recluse, like poor everything else spider. And there's not even brown recluses in California. Everybody's like, oh yes, there is. A doctor told me I got bit by one. Your doctor doesn't know about spiders.
Right.
There's been like 10 brown recluse spiders found in California in the last 100 years, and they were all in shipping and receiving areas. But anyways, so every spider in my house was a brown recluse spider. If it was brown, it was brown recluse. If it was black, it was black widow, and they got killed. My dad would do like kung fu, like killing so many spiders sometimes. And so I got that too. And so for the longest time, I was afraid of spiders. And if I found one in my room before I went to sleep, and I was one of those teenagers that had 8 million posters everywhere, but all my posters were of like raccoons and bears and mountain lions, not so much bands. But I would look under all the posters and kill all the spiders that were hiding under there before I could go to sleep. And finally, when I joined the California Conservation Corps and I was in the woods all the time, I started realizing that my spider phobia wasn't cool and healthy. And so what I did is I started learning about spiders. And I learned that there's like 5 spiders or something in California. People want to double check this because I didn't research this before I got on here. But there's not very many spiders that could actually penetrate our skin in California. And the ones, I think that 3 of the 5 are from Europe. They're invasive species and almost always found in our houses or around our structures. Kind of like how English house sparrows are an invasive species that is always around our structures. I think these spiders are the same way. So you're more likely to get bit by a spider in your house than you are out in the woods. And that's what I used to tell my Corps members too as I got older was, like, you're more likely to get bit by a spider in your house than you are way out here in the woods. And I wish more people knew that.
Yeah. And, you know, it's living with spiders. So I don't have a spider phobia, right? If I had sharks in the house, I might be a little, but in fact, I always warn them when they come visit, I'm very spider tolerant. So I don't, you know, the webs are in areas. And you're right. There are very few. There's only one spider really you have to worry about here, which is a black widow. And I always like to tell people, you shouldn't even worry about them. They are the most non-aggressive spiders. If you approach them, I don't know if they curl up. They really don't want to be tussled with, and they also don't want to leave their web. They're not spiders that are going to jump at you or anything. Obviously you have to be respectful around them. If they bite you, it is bad, but it's usually not deadly for an adult, although it's painful. But you can coexist with them. I mean, I don't let them be in the house, but other than that, there are spiders that will bite you and you can have an allergic reaction. But on the other hand, there's just, really the black widow's the one at least you should be respectful of. The others, may have venom, but like you said, they can, most of them can't penetrate your skin, and those that can are not going to kill you. I'm curious, John. I mean, this gets at spiders and other bugs. I don't care if I get bit by bugs. I mean, again, most of the bugs here, it may hurt a little bit if it happens, but it's not going to kill you. And I think that
there's way too much hype over bug bites.
Yeah, what is that? Why? I'm telling people who are listening, are you afraid of getting bit by a bug? I would love to hear. And Sandra, I'm sorry, I did put up a tarantula. Tarantulas are the cutest little spiders. You can hold them. They really are not at all aggressive. So hopefully we can get you over your tarantula fear.
Hey, Sandra.
But yeah, Griff, what? Yeah, talk a little bit about bug bites. I mean, why are we so afraid of getting bit by a bug?
Again, it's like a lot of times you have to know cultural history to understand where a lot of our fears come from. Like I said, like my parents immigrated from places that had brown recluses. A lot of my friends' parents immigrated from places that had dangerous spiders. I feel like, in our past, there's some bug bites that were a death sentence, like mosquitoes and stuff like that. And so we have this kind of like hype going into it. And then when we found out we can make money off, people's fear of bug bites, it became something you could dramatize. It, just became something to talk about. We like drama. And so like we put too much power into it. There are some very miserable bug bites, though. Keep it real. Yes. I have terrible reaction to yellow jackets, just yellow jackets, not any other bee venom or anything like that, but just yellow jackets. And if I got stung on my face, in a half an hour, my face would fill the whole screen. All you'd be able to see is a big fat face because I swell up so bad from yellow jackets. And so I hate getting stung. And I've worked outdoors all my life as a firefighter, trail builder, salmon habitat restoration. So I got bit every single summer, or stung or bit stung. Up until I think last year was like the first summer I didn't get stung, and it's miserable and I absolutely hate it. So I get it if you have terrible reactions, but I feel like a lot of people are letting little bites keep them out of the woods. I mean, it's you got a bug bite, it just means that you went someplace that was cool. That's how I look at it now. Like, oh, I got all these mosquito bites. I must not have been inside the house looking at a screen all day. It's a good thing. It's like celebrate your bug bites.
Right. And you hit on something really key here. And thank you. People are putting them up. Afraid, yes, mosquitoes, especially if you're allergic, can be bad. There's actually up here kissing bugs, right? I actually recently started getting bit by some. And having a little allergic reaction, but it wasn't the end of the world. There is the disease Chagas, I think is how you say it, Chagas. I looked it up. It doesn't occur in California. So I think the things you're talking about, there is some real good reasons for fear, right? There are some bug bites, but
especially if your family immigrated from someplace like Africa or parts of Asia where there's malaria, like you know people who died from bug bites. Like, I think mosquitoes have, like, when you think about, is there an animal that has evolved, that still like is killing humans? It's mosquitoes. It's not so much mountain lions and bears. It's mosquitoes. And so a lot of people, because they're a vector for so many diseases. So a lot of people who immigrate to, the United States and come out into the woods with me, sometimes like they'll have these like really blown up fears of mosquitoes because they know of mosquitoes being a vector for diseases because they're from someplace. So we're really lucky in California that that's not a thing. But it is a thing in some parts of the world.
Right.
And I know people in Alaska are like, if anybody from Alaska is watching this, they're probably like, y'all don't know about mosquitoes. And I went up to Alaska 2 summers, and all the hype they said about the mosquitoes was true. Yeah. There were so many mosquitoes on my back one time. I had to rest. It was heavy. It was like having a backpack on. Not really, but it was like unbelievable how many mosquitoes were up there. So, and that wasn't fun. But
Griff is very funny, Christine. That's why I love him. I agree. And thank you. People are sharing. And I agree, Griff. I mean, I grew up in New England and the mosquitoes were much worse. My dad likes to joke. He's a lifelong New Englander that California's kind of bug free. It's true. You can sit out in California in the summer without, the little coils for mosquitoes here. But you also hit on something I think is worth exploring, is we are not here to tell you there aren't good reasons to be afraid, or there aren't, some dangerous or deadly consequences, but it's about putting the risk in perspective, because as Griff just said, this is the key point for me. It prevents a lot of people from enjoying the outdoors.
Yes.
Is one, right? We want people to be comfortable, and it also usually is detrimental to the wildlife. For people keeping their environment sterile and killing every bug they see, that's not good either. So how do we get to sort of a healthy respect for the bugs that we know might have some bad consequences, but also learn more about the risk is pretty low on a lot of these. I mean, we all take our life in our hands every day when we get in our cars, in a way, with the percentages, in a way that there is a real big risk of injury or death. Like, I think in California, we have, is it 3,000 deaths a year, right? I mean, it's, the odds are pretty good there.
And they've gone way down. It was a lot higher 20 years ago.
Exactly. So
for car deaths,
any bug or any of these animals we're going to talk about today, like mountain lions is a good example. I don't know the stats on spiders, but there's been 6 deaths in 100 years. It's terrible when it happens. We don't want it to, but again, we need to be putting the risk in perspective for these animals and the danger. Right, John? I mean, Griffin.
Yeah, it's just that a lot of those, like mountain lion deaths, I have 3 points, and the other 2 of them about California Conservation Corps. But let me just hit on this first. There's a book called Pharaoh by George Manibayat. Beth, you would absolutely love this book. But he traveled in other cultures, and he gets really into rewilding, especially the United Kingdom. And he talks about how, in his book, there are so many reports of giant black cats in the United Kingdom, and it's often from really respectable people, like cops and teachers and judges, and not like the homeless dude that was, holding a glass pipe. It was like someone who was credible, and they would go out and look for these. And he was like, why is there so many repeated? And he thinks it's because we have an instinct to look for faces. So like a lot of people are like, I see faces in the clouds and the bark and blah, blah, blah. And he thinks that's an instinct. And he thinks it's also one of our instincts to find cats, because what has been our main predator since the beginning, when we started, being human. So I think that's why a lot of the, like, being predated upon is so scary to us. And I think in the past, in Ice Age, human tribes, when something killed our sister or our mom or our baby or whatever, like a dire wolf or a, American lion, which was a third bigger than the African lions, I think that humans probably held grudges, which we can do, and a lot of animals can't. And I think we poisoned and killed all of that animal until they were extinct. I think we've extincted a lot of predators that scared us. So, and I think now that we're evolving, we need to learn how to evolve past these fears, because these fears a lot of times are rooted in our Paleolithic fire ape, and we need to evolve beyond that now because we're losing species so fast. One of the things I used to tell my Corps members when they'd come out with me and they'd be scared, this is like, 22-year-old grown man staying right behind me, like whenever we're walking around the woods because he's afraid we're going to get attacked by something. And, I'm not getting that water. There's insects, because there'd be like caddisflies and mayflies and stoneflies in the creek. They didn't want to get in there because there was bugs. And I'd tell him, I was like, you know what? If we came to this creek and there was no bugs in here, we wouldn't get in it, because I'd be scared, because I'd be worried about poison. But since there's only caddisflies and mayflies in there, I know this water's probably clean enough to drink, besides Giardia, because these are indicators of health. And that is true about a lot of insects. When you see insects, it means there's no poison. And like, I know a bug looks scary, but it's not nearly as scary as the invisible poison is. And around here in Northern California, we have people who are growing pot illegally. We have legal growers who are doing it right. We have illegal growers who are doing it wrong, and they're dumping poisons in the water in some instances. And so we have to be careful about, if there's no bugs in the water, maybe you shouldn't get in there. Right. I also talked to my Corps members about like fruit and stuff, and they'd say like, oh, there's a bug bite on this fruit. And I'd be like, I think that's a good sign, because a lot of our fruit doesn't have bug bites on it because it's covered in poison. So I often would talk to them about that. The other really cool fear is, what is it called? I wrote it down because I just learned this word. Ophidiophobia.
What's that? What's
It's
Ophidiophobia?
it's the fear of snakes. Ophidiophobia. And I had so many core members afraid of snakes. And you know, I'm not afraid of snakes. I never have been. My mom is terribly afraid of snakes. One time her and I saw a snake together when I was like 8 in the creek, and she pushed me towards it. A garter snake. She was a great mother, but that was like her reaction. She was so scared. But and I always bring that up to her too. It's so funny. But I think people are afraid of snakes not just because of all the cultural reasons we have, but also because snakes don't have eyelids. So imagine if your neighbor didn't have eyelids and you walked outside and they were like, you know, you'd be afraid of them too. Even if they said something nice. I really like you. You'd be like, oh, don't. You know, like,
hold the thought on snakes, because we want to do a whole section on snakes. Let me finish up with spiders real quick, because I think you're right, and I do want to get to snakes. So Gabriel asked what kind of spider this is, and I put this up also for Gemma here. So this is a jumping spider. I don't know the exact species, but I'm putting this up because this is your gateway spider. If you're afraid of spiders, I want you to start here. Jumping spiders, right, Griff? They are adorable. Just Google jumping spiders. People actually, they are friendly. People have pet jumping spiders that literally will come out and you can sort of put it on your finger. They are fascinating to watch too. Look at that little guy, right? They don't bite. Okay, they're not going to bite you for the most part. I'm sure some, but I think this is the gateway spider. For those of you
definitely the gateway spider.
Spiders, I want you to start Googling jumping spiders. I want you to start watching the videos. Google jumping spiders pets, and you will see people that literally are at their desk with their little jumping spider there, who is very curious, who will actually catch flies for their little jumping spiders. So this to me is the gateway spider. For those of you who have a fear of spiders, here's where you should start. And
Google peacock jumping spider.
Bob, is a park ranger who works with bears. So really interesting, Bob. And again, it shows you that a lot of these are rooted in phobias that for even us who are biologists are hard to overcome. So let's see. Before we move on to snakes, I just want to, let's see. Oh, hey, my wonderful friend Patricia and her son Kumi's here. It's so glad to see you. Juan says, put up a picture of a potato bug and I'm leaving. Okay, I'm going to find one. Now, come on. That's it's going to be hard to be scared of. They can't even bite, but we will respect that for you.
I stepped on one of those barefooted one time, and all these horsehair worms came out of it. It was like the grossest thing that ever happened, but I was 8, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we tend to, when we're smaller, the tendency to tolerate grossness is good. So
cool.
Anyway, for spiders, that's your homework assignment. Those of you afraid of spiders, look, they're not going to, or if they do jump on you, it's kind of fun. I actually just had a jumping spider who hung out with me while I was outside reading, jumped on me and just sort of hung out there. So that is your assignment. And we could spend the whole show talking about all the incredible facts around how these guys see the world and how they actually, they literally jump in the midair to capture a fly or their prey. They are really amazing critters. So that is your homework. But let's go to snakes, because I think for most people, how many of you are afraid of snakes? And I think we should explore, John. So you're right. They're just going to look at you. I, again, am the only other animal we'll get into that I kind of have a phobia about is ticks. Other than that, I'll pick up anything. So let me get a photo of a snake. But John, so keep going down the road there. What is it you think that makes people so terrified of snakes? Because I want to make the point again, this gets at, for me, you're missing out on a lot because they're amazing creatures. And too many get killed. And snakes are an essential part of our ecosystem. So sort of that tendency to just kill snakes on sight is doing nobody any good. So that's why we really need people to get over their fear, right, Griff?
Yeah, and I really do think, really stop and think about it, folks. Snakes have scary faces, and I think it's because they don't have eyelids, not like eyelids that we think of eyelids. And so it makes them always look like this, and that scares people. Also, they just look creepy, and there's a lot of cultural stigmas about snakes, and so it's too bad. And what's funny is like it wasn't all cultures, like the Minoan culture, I think it was the Minoan culture, where they find all these statues of women holding two snakes like this. And they thought snakes, like the shedding was like renewal. So snakes was like this symbol of rebirth, and it was like this high status symbol. And this is like BC that we're talking about. So it's interesting how different cultures have different perceptions of snakes. But snakes without the eyelids, like they look kind of scary and they're slithering around. And there's a lot of interesting stuff online about how to overcome your fear of snakes. And it works really well. And I've actually talked to core members who are really afraid of snakes about it, and it helped them too. So when we're ready to get into that, I'll let you know the steps to getting over your snake phobia.
Yeah, stay at the end. We're going to get over how you can get over some of these phobias, and snakes absolutely be one of them. So most people are, rattlesnakes, I think, is a snake that for most people, and again, for good reason, they obviously are venomous and can kill or seriously hurt people. And obviously, if you have animals like I do, I did have a dog bit by a rattlesnake, although our pets actually are a little less at risk than we are. If they don't get bit on an airway, they have a little more tolerance than we do for the venom of rattlesnakes. But, people tend to say there's sort of good snakes and bad snakes. They're all good. I mean, they may not all be good to us. But rattlesnakes, you would not want a world without rattlesnakes. And we would have way too many rodents, and rodents are a carrier of disease. And I don't, again, I'm not demonizing rodents either. You wouldn't want a world without rodents, but it is about keeping it in balance. So especially if you're in California, but of course, rattlesnakes exist throughout the US. You have to learn to live with rattlesnakes. Killing them off is not the option we want to go. And respecting what they do for our ecosystem and our environment. And also, Griff, do you want to talk about, in essence, again, these are not aggressive snakes, right? They are not
no, and
in the woods to leap at us.
And I did a 10-episode online show with Animal Planet called Wild Jobs. And if you guys want to see it, it's on Facebook. If you go to Animal Planet's Facebook, you can go to animalplanet.com. There's commercials. If you go to their Facebook page, on the left-hand side, you'll see Crikey with the Irwins and then Wild Jobs. If you click on that, on episode 10, I stepped on rattlesnakes. Not meanly, just adding a little bit of pressure. I was working with Kel Morris, who's the venom teacher, and his whole mission in life is to get people to stop killing rattlesnakes. And so he shows that they don't really want to bite you. So he stepped on like 300 at the time, using a fake leg and a warm fake leg and a cold fake leg and a real leg. And they only struck like 3 of the 300 times or something like that. Like most of the time when you stepped on rattlesnakes, they just hold still. So we probably walk by rattlesnakes all the time that aren't rattling and don't even know it because they're not striking us, they're not biting us. In fact, we've all read that, the people who get bit by rattlesnakes are usually the ones trying to kill them or trying to move them. And I just want to, since we're going over things that I learned from Kel Morris, I asked him, are rattlesnakes evolving to lose their rattles because people are killing the ones that rattle? And he said it would take thousands of years. So that's not happening. The thing about it is that rattlesnakes don't always rattle. Their first mode of defense is to be cryptic, is to hide, camouflage. And so a lot of these rattlesnakes that we stepped on, they never even moved. Like we went and stepped on them and they didn't budge. And all the ones we stepped on the day that I was with him, none of them struck us. None of them struck at us at all. A couple of them rattled. Some of them never even rattled. So rattlesnakes get a huge, they're disrespected and unduly so. If you're careful and you're not trying to kill them or pick them up, you're not going to get bit. I have been in the woods working outside more than anybody I know since I was 18 years old. And I have had encounters with rattlesnakes and I've never been bit.
Yep. And, a couple people brought up pets and this is a good one too. And, Griff's right. I hike all the time and I've seen rattlesnakes. It's not that you don't have a chance of being bit, but it's pretty low. They will go through everything they can to avoid biting you. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is true for most wildlife. Most wildlife is going to do everything they can to avoid an encounter because they know it's probably not going to end well for them, much less you. But we have had some about pets. And I think for rattlesnakes, it's probably more our pets in some respects than us. I mean, sometimes our pets are not as smart as we are, or we have livestock. And so this is what I learned. And I did have a dog who was bit years ago by a rattlesnake. And this is almost 20 years ago now. And I realized she was bit. She went up trying to play with it, like, most of our dogs do, like, oh, that looks like fun. And the snake, really, I watched the whole thing. I couldn't get there soon enough. Did everything it can not to bite. And the dog just kept coming. So it ended up biting my dog Cirrus on the leg. And I realized in that moment, I knew nothing about, oh my God, does she have 5 minutes to live? All I could remember was keep her still. So I picked her my partner at the time picked this 40-pound dog up and we walked it to the car. And the vet was very educational. She did not even give her anti-venom. I guess animals have a little more resistance to the venom than we would. She told me it's lucky it's not you. That's 6 weeks in the hospital. But for most animals, it's if they're bit on an airway because it does swell. So if the animals are bit on an airway, that's where you really can get fatal. And there's no doubt she always had a little tissue damage, but she really, with some regular antibiotics and some cream, her leg swelling was not bad enough even to cause permanent injuries. So again, it's something you do. And I know there are, I don't know too much about them, but there are some training that you can take your dog to avoid rattlesnakes, which if your dog keeps doing it might be good. But for the most part, I mean, no rule is 100%. Your animals do have a little more protection than we do as people. And it's really, a lot of horses will get because they get bit on their nose because they're grazing, and that's an airway. So anyway, just know that about your pets. I know a lot of you are concerned about that. And anyway, Juan says, my biggest fear is stepping on a rattlesnake. It happens, but much less than we think. And I was hiking last year, summer, and as Griff has told these stories too, I literally almost stepped on one. I was not paying attention. I think I was trying to photograph a butterfly and literally put my foot down within 2 inches of this snake, and it did not bite. I'm not saying that'll happen every time. I've read stories of people who do just step on it without knowing. But for the most part, just know, again, when we get back to putting the risk in perspective, rattlesnakes are way down on the risk level. Again, you're taking more of a risk getting in your car. So try that. Let's see. Cheryl says both her cat and her dog were bitten. Cheryl, I hope they both came out okay. I know, again, it's not always a happy ending, but for the most part, it is. Griff, what's another animal you want to? I have a homework assignment for those of you who, again, may have a fear of snakes. Let me put up, and John, I'll have you talk about this snake. I know you know it. If you want to start getting into a snake that will make you feel a little better, for me, it's the king snakes we have here in California. People often refer to these as the good snakes because they do kill and eat rattlesnakes. So they are good snakes to have on your property, but I don't like the good versus bad. The king snakes have just as much a role as the rattlesnakes. But for those of you who do have a phobia, if it helps you to think of it that way, if you see a king snake on your property, you really do want them there. They are beautiful. I mean, look at that, right, Griff? I mean, king snakes are just incredible snakes, and they're really badass. They take on rattlers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love king snakes too. We got 2 species in California, right?
Yep.
The black and white one, and then the California king snake. That one. Yeah, beautiful. Mm-hmm. We have rubber boas in Humboldt Redwood State Park too, which are boa constrictors. There's 2 native boa constrictors in California. Most people don't know that. And we had I just found a rubber boa a couple months ago here, and it was beautiful. It's only the 3rd time I've seen them in the wild, but they have the fake head on one end, and they're sweet, the nicest little snake, which is kind of what leads to its downfall, because people take them home. Stop taking them home because they need to be out here having babies, not being in your house prisoner, living a comfortable life until they die. Leave them here, but they are so cool. They're like the one snake no one's ever afraid of because they don't have their eyes are really small, so they look more like a worm than a snake. It's really interesting.
And then the other homework assignment I have, to me, this is now this is an endangered species, and so it's one you're not probably real likely to see, although you could. But I think this is one of the prettiest snakes in the world, and we have them here in California. Let me see if I can do this right. I'm getting better at this technology, but this is the San Francisco garter snake. I think it is one of the prettiest snakes on the planet. Isn't that amazing? Has anybody seen one of these in the wild? They are beautiful snakes. Look at that color. Again, they're garter snakes. They're not going to kill you. They are really good at controlling rodents and otherwise. So this is a beautiful snake we do have here in California. So pretty cool.
But if you pick them up, they will wipe poop on you.
There you go.
And it stinks really bad.
Well, that would be a badge of honor, I think, John. So John, Griff, you're out there a lot, obviously being a park ranger. What are some other animals you get people saying they're frightened of?
Well, mountain lions and bears are the two most, sometimes coyotes, and then ticks and yellow jackets. Those are the ones we hear about the most. A lot of people come up here and they ask me, are there bears here or are there mountain lions here? And it's interesting. And when I worked for the California Conservation Corps, I have these like super tough kids from rough backgrounds that, could scrap and they could hold their own, like super, like just resilient people who were scared to death of being in the woods because of bears and mountain lions. And I'd tell them, I'd say, I would rather walk 1,000 miles through the wilderness, butt naked, covered in honey, than walk 10 blocks in some of our most crime-ridden parts of, the United States. Like, you're not going to have, like, it's so rare that you would have these bad encounters. And you know what I carry with me? I carry bear spray with me a lot, but it's not for bears. It's usually, and sadly, for the dogs that people dump in the park. And we had a really mean dog this summer. Someone dumped this really poor abused dog and wouldn't let us catch it. We tried so hard to catch it. I don't know what happened to it, but it was aggressive. And so we have to be careful about those kinds of things in the woods. Crazy people and crazy dogs scare me way more than mountain lions and bears ever did.
Yeah, and that's a good, that is, again, another good point that, again, putting that risk in perspective. Sometimes, these animals that get a bad rap, it's actually the animals you don't think. I mean, we all love our dogs, but as we know, especially dogs that are dogs are responsible for way more human conflict just because there's more of them than most wildlife. So, it is, again, not that I have 5 dogs. I'm not demonizing dogs, but again, putting that risk in perspective. But I think bears is a good place to start. We actually had a question about it. Let me share. I will tell, and I bet John has a good bear story. But so I've lived with bears almost my whole life. Here is some grizzly bears from Yellowstone. Hold on one sec. Let me. Dun dun dun. Bears are amazing creatures, and again, they are not lurking in the woods, waiting to attack us. Indeed, they are wanting to most of the time avoid an encounter with us. They are also extremely smart creatures. So, they can outwit us a lot. And as we know in Yosemite, especially in the sort of the pursuit of food, will outwit us a lot. But potentially the risk is there for attack or conflict. But the risk is really low. In California, at least, we have not had a death by a black bear in 100 years or more. And that's all we do have. We do not have grizzly bears here. These are grizzly bears from Yellowstone. I did live in Yellowstone for 4 or 5 years and worked there, and one time I saw 10 grizzly bears in one day. But I think what, Griff and I will tell you, especially with bears, but with all wildlife, but bears is a good example of this. And the person who asked the contradictory info, you need to learn to read wildlife behavior. We've all learned to read weather sign, right? When I was just starting out doing hiking and going off trail and hiking for 13,000 foot peaks, I used to be afraid of every cloud. I don't know if you went through that phase, Griff, where you just thought every cloud might have a lightning potential in it. So I learned to read the weather, much like we all do. You need to do the same with wildlife and be able to read wildlife behavior. You don't have to be an expert all the time. But again, as we talked about some of these animals, knowing like a black widow isn't going to jump on you. That way, even if you walk very close to a web, you don't have to be afraid. And it's the same with bears. The sort of everybody has heard you play dead with bears. And that's a good general rule of thumb. But you really have to know what type of behavior the bear is exhibiting, because there are some circumstances with bears you actually want to fight back, and that's if you think that they are in hunting mode or wanting to pursue you for food. That's where you don't want to play dead. Play dead is if the bear is thinking you're a threat and you want to make sure that you minimize and show that you aren't. So a general rule said play dead is good, but if a bear is starting to munch on you and it looks like, it seems like it's a bear coming into your tent in the middle of the night starting to munch on you is not a bear who thinks you're a threat. That is a bear who is looking for a meal. That is really rare, but that's an instance where you would fight back. So Griff, what do you tell when people ask how to be bear safe? How do you sort of educate that it isn't quite as simple as people have brought up, but how do you tell people to feel confident that they can sort of deal with a bear encounter?
It kind of depends on which bear you're talking about. Because when I lived in Sawyer's Bar up on Salmon River, we had a dump that the bears were always hanging out in the dumpster. And so people wouldn't even be too afraid to go all the way to the dumpsters. So they would just throw their trash out right by their car, and it would bring in more bears. And so you'd pull up to the dump and there'd be like 10 bears waiting for you to get out of your car, which was totally scary. And there, there's a kind of a unspoken rule that the rangers will say, and that's a fed bear is a dead bear. Like, you really don't want them to become habituated. So in the park here, we have signs everywhere that say don't feed the bears, and we have bear boxes and all the things that in your bear chapter in When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors, we've gone through similar struggles in this park with bears. So what we tell people is, like, as good as it feels to feed wildlife, it feels really good to feed wildlife, but it's the wrong thing to do. I love people who are so compassionate, empathetic to wildlife. They want to help them, but by feeding them, it's the wrong thing to do. And I've been in campgrounds, when I was in the CCC, and these campgrounds where they didn't have good garbage disposal. And at night we would hear the bears right outside our tent. And there is nothing more unnerving than waking up to hearing like right by your tent. Like, that's not a cool way to wake up. And so when that happens, I would get out of my tent and I'd be like, and they'd go away. And a couple core members would also love to chase bears. There's always those core members. So we would chase the bears away. But there was bears that kept returning to our camp and keeping us up all night. And even when I got the chainsaw out, started it, it still didn't, flee. And that's because people fed it. And that's, in the camp where they didn't dispose of their food or stored their food properly, and that's really bad for the bear. That bear is going to end up getting into trouble and probably getting shot. So when it comes to fear and bears, I have more fear for the bears than fear the bears themselves.
That's a really good point. And one of my earliest projects that I worked on, and Bob Roney, who's here, was part of this. We worked with the National Park Service when I worked for the Yosemite Association on trying to fix the bear incidences that were happening in Yosemite Valley. And it was really a human problem because we weren't storing our food right, and the bears were getting into conflict. And what happened when you turned it around and made it the human problem, and it was our responsibility to store our food and not let the bears into it? Incidents went down to almost nothing and continue to this day. So it really is about us taking responsibility. A lot of conflict with wildlife is kind of our fault, right? What the late Steve Thompson said, it's my problem when the dumber visitors and the smarter bears intersect, right? I mean, we had a really interesting situation up here on a community board where this woman had posted, I'm all about coexisting with wildlife, but the bear broke into my chicken coop and broke the rules. And so that's a dead bear. And it really struck me, you know, kind of funny that, sorry, I knew my dogs would bark at some point. The bear doesn't know the rules. We do, but the bear doesn't. And so he didn't know killing a chicken was a death sentence for him. It is up to us to be safe, to take a little more responsibility. Much like if a toddler had matches and lit one, you wouldn't say, oh, you know, it was the toddler's fault for, you know, catching themselves on fire. So I think a lot of what we're talking about, again, you know, people, you have good reason sometimes to be fearful, and we all have phobias, but we also want to ensure the wildlife don't suffer as a result. And I think that's one of the reasons this is so important. Before we shift into some tricks for doing that, let me show you just a beautiful wild bear, because this is a bear that was in my backyard, and it was just such an incredible experience. This bear kind of posed for the camera. It was pretty amazing. What a beautiful black bear. And it was something quite remarkable to celebrate, having a bear like this in my backyard and being able to coexist. And again, one that posed so well for the trail camera. John, what's one of your most memorable bear encounters?
I have a lot of memorable bear encounters. One's probably when I was 22 and I was working for the Forest Service, and I was doing a late season. I was doing salmon surveys. So I was there in November, December. Everybody else had left, and I had not been at this barracks before. So I didn't know what was going on with this barracks. And there was a bear that came and sat on the back porch every night, where I think that the people had been feeding it, the people in the barracks before. And I didn't know that. So the first time I encountered it, I walked out into the back porch because I heard something out there, and there was a big black bear sitting right there, and we had this like super close encounter. It was really bizarre. And that bear came back, and I was like, made it my life mission to make this bear afraid of humans, because I was like, this bear is going to get shot. And it never worked. It hung out. And so the phone was in the fire house, which was like a good 200, 300 yards away. And to get there at night, it was super dark, and I had my flashlight. And I always had to run in with this bear. I knew the bear was going to be there somewhere on the way to the telephone. I just didn't know where. It scared the heck out of me all the time.
And someone asked here, oh, thanks. Great video of the bear. So I didn't take that off. About wearing bells and air horns and stuff like that. Somebody else asked Janice about fatal bear attacks. Again, there has not been a fatal bear attack by a black bear in California, I think, in 100 years. It's just, our bears are kind of California chill here. But you know, how the sort of what you do, the bear bells and stuff. Listen, I'm going to get back to, and I know Griff will back me on this, and I just did a podcast of this bit rave. I can share the link because it was how to be safe, and we talked in detail about a lot of animals. It gets back to reading their behavior. Most wildlife encounters end without you even knowing you had an encounter. But it also, you knowing a little bit about the animals and wildlife in your area is going to go a long way. And anything you can do to just, the animal doesn't want conflict any more than you do. And when I was living, this is a great story about how, just knowing a little bit about grizzly bear behavior allowed me to feel comfortable and the bear to feel comfortable. I am a big trail runner, which admittedly is not the safest thing to do. Although my 50-year-old knees I haven't been able to do it as much as I like these days. I was trail running in Yellowstone, and I did not do it in areas that were, had a lot of grizzly, but it still was a little risky. I didn't wear earphones. You want to be aware of your surroundings. And I came around this one trail, and I always carried bear spray too, which is a good thing to carry for both the human threat and for any wildlife, so that you have something as a last line of defense. I'm not an advocate of carrying a gun. I think that usually ends badly for the wildlife when it doesn't need to. But pepper spray is a great deterrent. I came around this corner, and there was a grizzly bear eating flowers. We tend to think of grizzly bears, bloody, but most of the time they're munching on ants or white bark pine or flowers. And this bear was munching, luckily, on flowers, because if it had been a carcass, that might have been a little different scenario. I stopped. It had seen me, so it was too late to sort of back up. She stood up, looked at me, and I got my bear spray on ready, thinking, okay, this could go either way. Literally went back to eating, as if to say, just get out of here. And, just behaving a certain way probably diffused that situation. Whereas if other people had gotten aggressive or ran, the bear might have behaved differently. So that's why, like, whatever it is in your area, I don't know whether it's snakes or bears, learn a little bit, learn the wildlife weather is what I've been saying. And a lot of those situations will end well for all. Right, Griff? I mean, yeah. What's the most, I'm curious, Griff, what's the most dangerous or a situation you felt, okay, this is one that I got to be careful in with wildlife? Do you remember one that you felt a little scared in? Or
I met this baboon at a sanctuary named Chrissy.
I think I remember that. Let me find it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like episode 1 of Wild Jobs, and baboons scare me, you know. And so I've never been around one, and every time I've seen one, it's always like sensationalized, you know, program where it's like showing how big its teeth are and attacking something. So I was like worried about it, and she came and she got right in my face, like this close to my face. And the person who runs the sanctuary is like, "Don't worry, she's not going to bite your face off." And I'm like, "Yes, she is. She's going to bite my face off." But, you know, I was on camera, so I wasn't trying to look, you know, like a scaredy cat. So I was just trying to be chill. But I was terrified. In this picture, this is what me terrified looks like. And Chrissy was super nice, and I started petting her, and I think she had a crush on me by the end of the show.
Oh.
Yeah, we hit it off, but it was scary to have that baboon in my face.
Right. No, yeah, they can be pretty aggressive, fearsome creatures. So I think having that respect, and Cam, I didn't answer I think the jury or the science is a little out on bells. I think, listen, animals, like Griff just demonstrated, animals are individuals. Like, we tend to not think of them on, but like P22, the mountain lion I work on in Griffith Park, not every mountain lion would tolerate living in Griffith Park. All right. Some mountain lions might have attacked somebody by now, just because might not have been for them being around all those people. So animals, much like people, have personality and have different tolerances. So I think it really is about reading the wildlife, much like you do people. You walk down a crowded street, you're assessing how people behave and whether they're a risk and whether they're going to mug you or not. It's the same we need to do with wildlife. I think it's, you know, once you learn a little wildlife behavior, assessing what they may or may not do, having a healthy respect, but perhaps not a fear. But as far as, like, if you are, the best thing you can do is make your presence known, because most wildlife will just avoid you at that point. And that's where I think talking, in my mind, is a little better than bear bells. I think an air horn definitely would work, but how is that for an experience in the wild, right? You're blasting, you're not going to see any wildlife at that point. So I just think talking, even if you're alone, or singing once in a while, is probably a really good tactic for deterring wildlife who are really going to go out of their way to avoid you. Any other advice in that safety realm, Griff? I
like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make your presence known. Just make your presence known, but don't do so in an artificial way. So Griff, let's transition into. I know we had a really fascinating discussion. I mean, I think almost everybody on this channel wants to love wildlife, even the ones we fear. Like me, I want to love sharks. I love sharks, but I still have a little of that phobia. But I know, Griff, you've been reading a lot on research on what are some tips for getting over, phobias or irrational fears around wildlife. How do we do that? How am I ever going to feel?
You know, I started looking into this when I worked with youth for most of the last 20 years, and I didn't want them to be afraid of animals. I wanted them to embrace wildlife and being outside in nature. So, like, I knew we had to get past this fear, and for some of them it was huge. And one of the ways that I would do this would be like, okay, so you're afraid of mountain lions, so I want you to, here's some books, and in 3 days you're going to give a presentation on mountain lions. And I started doing that, and it worked. And so when I started doing research in it, I found out that is one of the ways that therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists help us get over our anxieties, is you become a specialist in it. So when you're afraid of snakes, you should study snakes. When you're afraid of bears, you should study them and demystify them and start to understand, because when you understand something, you can start to be empathetic with it. Okay. So I found this worked in my own experiences. And so some of the rough things for people to get over were spiders and snakes. And because I guess spiders and snakes seem less personal than mountain lions and bears. So what the advice from therapists and psychologists to help you overcome your Ophidiophobia, which is snake fear, is to study them, okay, and then draw them, play with a plastic snake, okay, watch snake videos, okay. Here, I made a list of it. Get a snake shedding and keep it in your house and touch it a lot.
Oh, I know that.
And a toy snake. Go to a pet store and look at all the snakes and ask the person to take out the snake and play with it in front of you. And then next time go back and see if you could touch it. And then go to a nature center or something later on when they like show snakes and see if you can start touching them even more. And there's a really good case study on the internet of this woman who wouldn't go outside for up to 10 years because she was so afraid that she might see a snake. Okay. So imagine that, like you don't go outside for 10 years, so you might see a snake. And so her psychologist worked with her and he took her through those steps. And she ended up being the person at the nature center showing the snakes to everybody. So it works. It works on a lot of different fears. But the first step is to understand, to explore. So if you're afraid of spiders, get to know their life cycles, read about them, watch videos on them. And that will help you. The more understanding you have, the less fear you have. And you know what? You can get to a place where you can have an understanding of dangerous animals. Like I'm not going to go up and sing Kumbaya with the rattlesnake face to face or anything like that. So, but I'm not afraid of rattlesnakes because I understand them. I don't stick my finger in the fire because I'm afraid of getting burnt. I don't stick my finger in the fire because I know I'll get burnt. So you could be the same way with, dangerous animals. You don't want to like go to, like to Spain and run from the bull because you're afraid of getting gored. You're going to get gored. You don't pick up the snake because you're afraid of getting bit. You're going to get bit. Like, don't do things that are going to be dangerous. You don't have to be afraid. You can just be prepared. I don't know if I lost everybody on that one, but
no, that's a really good way.
Cool in my head.
Comment. Did Griff lose you? I don't think so. I think I love the idea of like drawing and exploring. You're right. Become a specialist. That was it. Like I was not afraid of spiders per se, but I was afraid of black widows for a long time. But the more I learn now, whatever, they're not going to, jump on me. It's very easy to avoid. And, I also think humor. I do think like for sharks, I love this meme. The ocean gets its saltiness from the tears of misunderstood sharks who just want to cuddle. I think, especially when you can joke about something, I think it does help to diminish some of the fears. But I love what you mean. Yeah, we're not afraid of, burning ourselves. We just want to avoid it. And I think that's a lot with wildlife. Nope, you didn't lose here, Cam. See, makes perfect sense. So that's your assignment. So for Griff and I's next talk, we are going to check on your homework and and you can become a specialist, which brings me to let me show you. I put in the event, and I can email anybody this too, but an assignment from my book just to this end. Let me call it up for you. You can print this out. You don't have to buy the book, but one of the journal entries in the book that you can just print out on your own if you don't buy it is this. Let me see if I can do this. And I really want to thank Griff for his help with my book. We talked a lot about some of the activities that could help people and inspire people to connect with wildlife in different ways. But so this is what animal frightens you. And you actually pick an animal, and much like Griff just said, you start exploring why does it frighten you? And then the next page that's not shown on here is you have to actually become kind of a specialist. I don't use that term, but look up facts and see if after you sort of go down the rabbit hole of watching videos and learning facts, has that helped a little bit with the fear? So I think that, that is really good advice, Griff. I think, for those of you, who is the person who is afraid of Jerusalem crickets, you definitely need to look those up. You will not be afraid of them anymore, I think, once you explore it. I love this comment. Ooh, Yeah, Jules and cricket, yuck, potato bugs. You know, they do look kind of yucky, I'll give you that, but they're harmless, right? They're kind of cute. Gabriel, yeah, I think you express it really well here. I love the idea of embracing the natural world around me and learning about it beforehand. And, you know, for me, you know, listen, I'm a wildlife advocate, and so is Griff. So one of our sort of ulterior motives here is we need people to coexist, because if we keep killing wildlife out of fear, wildlife isn't going to exist anymore. But I'd say that Griff and I also share the other goal of, if you are afraid of wildlife, you're missing some magical moments in life, right, Griff? I mean, we should be celebrating these encounters. We want you all to have joyous fun, whether it be a spider or a snake or a bear or a mountain lion. These are incredible moments to have, right, Griff?
Yeah, and you know what? If you're a good challenge, like life, I think that life's all about growth, you know, and so like trying to learn as much as we can in this one precious life as we're moving through the world. And a really good challenge to help you grow would be to take the thing that you're afraid of, like snakes or spiders or whatever, and end up becoming the speaker for that. So, you know, maybe you're totally afraid of sharks like Beth and I are, and you can get into like start reading about sharks and studying sharks, and then maybe speaking for them and telling people, you know, like one way to help sharks is to like not let trash get into the ocean, or you know, boycotting certain types of food and getting the seafood watch card and making sure that you're supporting shark conservation. If you're afraid of snakes, pick a snake in your local area that needs a speaker, like the San Francisco garter snake that she showed a picture of. It's endangered, and so like it needs someone to speak for its habitat. So maybe if you're afraid of snakes, you could get to know this snake and start being the speaker for it. This is a great way to grow personally, because you'll overcome this weird fear, or, you know, totally legitimate. I don't even see weird,
Right.
But this fear, okay, and then plus make the world a better place at the same time. Get some feel goods for that. So, and these kinds of animals that you're afraid of, lots of people are afraid of them. I think that there was like a third of Americans are afraid of spiders and snakes. So it's like, if you could speak for maybe an endangered snake or an endangered spider or a native spider, that'll help you grow, overcome your fear, and make the world a better place. So that's my challenge to you.
I think that's a really good one. I'm going to show you a video. You know, I feel like, given I'm usually known for mountain lion conservation, I feel like we should talk a little bit about demystifying mountain lions. So I'm going to show you, it's going to be a little hard to do, but we're going to try. My computer's, I live in a rural area, so the bandwidth is at a premium, but hopefully this will work. Application, nope, let's see. Anyway, I'll try to find it. Mountain lions, listen, a mountain lion can kill you, okay? Mountain lions are fearsome. They are really formidable predators, but the truth is they don't want to. And indeed, we are not on their prey list. We just aren't. So there are things you can do to be safe around mountain lions. And I mean, we could do a whole talk on that, but just know, demystifying that mountain lions are not sitting in the woods waiting to hunt us. Again, in 100 years, there's been less than 20 attacks, and only six have been fatal. And of course, we never want a human being killed. But on the other hand, putting the risk in perspective there. Most mountain lion encounters end without you even knowing you had one. So you can do things to be safe, like don't run at 2 a.m. when they are sort of on the hunt, right? That is when they're hunting deer, but they really want to hunt deer. I mean, that is really their prey. If if a mountain lion is being sighted in your area, make sure you just pay extra attention to small animals and even children. Just keep your eye on them. But for the most part, we are not, again, on their menu list. And this is a little small to see because I'm not having any luck with the video itself. But let's see. This is a mountain lion that one of my neighbors actually had napping in their yard. And I would not advocate everybody doing this, but as someone who understands mountain lion behavior, we were able to sit at a distance and watch this cat, who clearly had chosen a place to nap around people. This was actually in between two people's yard and was not much, I knew it was sort of in a safe space. We kept our distance, yet the mountain lion being aware of us was sort of like, hey, I'm taking a nap. Can you just leave me alone? So I took this quick video, but I demonstrate this to show that, these animals are not on the attack, at least towards us, 99.9% of the time. And knowing a little bit about mountain lion behavior, now this mountain lion, there's no doubt it was not zero risk, but I was with 4 people. A mountain lion is very rarely going to go after a group of people. If I had been alone, I definitely would not have, sort of hung around to see this cat. And again, a different situation might not have all even, stopped to appreciate it. So again, learning a little bit about wildlife behavior allows you to share in some of these magical moments where I think if you don't, as John said, become sort of even a little specialist on wildlife around you, you might be missing out on some moments out of fear that unnecessarily is happening. So Janine says the mountain lion seems to be getting a lot of bad press lately. I think a lot of that was, and Griff, you had the runner on of the sort of viral mountain lion video that went on. And let me have you talk a little bit about that, because I think, that was a good learning moment. For me, I didn't hold him as much at fault. I thought he did a pretty good job not knowing much about mountain lion behavior. I mean, you and I knew in that situation, and I want to be clear, he was probably never under any deadly threat. That mountain lion was clearly in get the heck out away from me mode. If she wanted to take him down, she could have, but he didn't know that. My only fault with him is he tried to approach the kittens, which could have, sort of staved off the whole attack. My fault was more with the media, trying to portray that as a deadly cat trying to attack him. But what did you learn in talking with him, Griff?
So those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's Kyle Burgess, the guy who had the mountain lion coming at him. So Kyle had actually just filmed some bobcat kittens not too long and thought that these were them again. So when he was approaching, he didn't think mountain lion kittens. He thought bobcat kittens. And for those who saw,
I will say, even that, back away. Any young of animals, it's good to get the heck out of there.
And then the mountain lion, she kind of just like came out the middle of the road. Like I didn't even see her until she came out the road. Like it was like the Enterprise beamed her right there. She was just like all of a sudden, like, ah. And the important thing about that video, the reason why I was thankful for that video after the news got done sensationalizing it, is that it showed us escorting behavior. And a lot of animals do escorting behavior. I mean, animals do it to other animals. Wolves, there's like videos of wolves escorting grizzlies away from their dens. There are coyotes in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco that escort people and their dogs away from their dens. And so what she was doing, the reason why I spoke out against it, I actually made a video about it, and then and Kyle saw it and liked it, and so he contacted me. But it was like, I wanted to call out the media for sensationalizing it, calling it stalking. Like, you got to give mountain lions credits. If they were stalking him, he wouldn't have known until it jumped on his back. They're ambush predators. And so like what she was doing was escorting. She was like, get away from my babies, get away from my babies. And she was turning to the side and making herself look big. If they were hunting you, they wouldn't want you to see them. They would be trying to make themselves small, not showing how big they were. That was her trying to scare him away from her babies. And so Kyle found out what was happening. I think he did almost everything right. He yelled. He made sure she saw him. People were like, "Oh, he shouldn't have looked her in the face." You want to make sure mountain lions can see you. That you see them because they're ambush predators.
Right. So not direct eye contact, but you want to look at them. You do want to look.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They need to know that they're there.
Yep.
So he did almost everything right. He was a super nice guy, and he started selling shirts, which happens a lot when people's videos go viral. Now they're trying to like capitalize on it. But he donated the money to Cougar Conservancy and Mountain Lion Foundation, which I thought was a really cool thing for him to do. So I'm glad that whole experience happened to him, because I think other people would have been scared and demanded that this mountain lion be punished. But she was just being a mom, and one of the things that he could have done to maybe help that a lot was if he would have had someone with him, he could have stayed in the front being loud and big, and they could have dipped and got a rock and they could have threw it. And even if you just threw the rock right in front of her, she would have probably have been gone. So I think he did a good job, and I'm glad we have that video because it introduced the public to escorting behavior, which is not I'm going to kill you behavior and eat you. It's get away from my baby's behavior.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm glad we got it too. I'm glad everything ended well. And Cam put for you, Griff, the Cardi escorting what was very cool, because most people don't know the difference. So it did at least turn into a teaching moment. And I love, like, for me, I'm picturing like much we're telling you now, like, all right, here's what you do when you see wildlife to minimize an encounter. Like, that was the mountain lion version. She's probably going through her checklist. Okay, I'm going to look big, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a swipe, and I'm going to charge. All the things like we teach people. That mountain lion was following Mountain Lion 101.
How to get rid of a human.
That's what was passed down, from her mom, right? The reason to me it was so important to dispel the media hype is because what we keep saying, what you saw, which really concerned me, was everybody, he should have been carrying a gun, and the calls for, I think what tends to happen when people are armed who may not know wildlife behavior. Again, there are hunters out there who know the wild and know when to use a gun. But when you have people who are carrying guns without knowledge of animal behavior, that escalates the situation too quickly. And usually you get wildlife that doesn't need to be dead. And so that's why I think first, that's, last resort. And that showed that, the calls for that animal to either to be killed or for, I would have killed it if I had a gun. That's what alarmed me, is that we don't want to always be going to the solution of the wildlife needs to die, especially in situations where they really weren't a threat. So we need to help educate people to know when you really, most of the time they aren't a threat, even if it looks like it, Yep. Lynn says, if not for the mountain lion video, I wouldn't have discovered Griff, and I wouldn't be following and learning now. That's awesome.
Oh, awesome, Lynn. Awesome.
I'm going to share a poem. I love this poem, and I think we'll sort of end with this and then take questions. Make sure we get to all your questions or comments or whatever you want to share with us. We have another 10 minutes before we are scheduled to end. Let me see here if I can do this. I am technologically challenged sometimes. And Tony, let's just give a hand out to Tony for being behind the scenes. Tony,
hey, Tony.
Amazing. She helps us with social media. If Tony wants to put a link to her Facebook page in there, we'd love it. She, though, is afraid of frogs, as I think we talked about before. So we're going to hope that we, can help her with dispelling her frog phobia at some point, because we want her to love frogs. I'm trying to get at the root of her frog fear, because I think frogs are some of the cutest things ever. But here's trying to talk and chew gum at the same time here. Here we go. I love this poem because I think it gets at, the attitude we're trying to impart here, which is, yes, there are situations you need to be fearful. Animals can be dangerous, much like humans can be dangerous in situations, but for both humans and wildlife, the risk at all times is pretty low. But this poem, I will read it for those. I killed a spider. Not even a murderous brown recluse, nor even a black widow. And if the truth were told, this was only a small sort of papery spider who I should have run when I picked up the book, but she didn't. And she scared me and I smashed her. I don't think I'm allowed to kill something because I am frightened. Nikki Giovanni from Allowables. And I don't know, Griff, to you, doesn't this just capture that? I think for me, getting over our fright is also sort of a moral responsibility. I don't know. Would you think of it that way?
Yeah. I mean, I like to look at spiders as little amazing creatures. I killed a lot of them when I was a teenager, when I had, low-key arachnophobia. But I really like them. And I can pick them up and hold them now and not be scared at all, and just kind of be wondering at them. Looking into things deeper enriches your life. And I know it's really hard for people just to hear that and go, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go outside and grab a spider now. But if you can get yourself moving in that direction, Now when I look at spiders, I'm like, this is really cool. I never kill spiders anymore. And if there's a spider in my house that I don't want there's some that like, I'm like, your scientific name must be Big Harrius Bichassius because you look like you need to go outside. And I'll take those and I'll put them in, a jar and I'll like let them go outside. But most of the spiders I let chill, especially jumping spiders. I had a jumping spider that lived for weeks on my keyboard.
Yeah, I know they do. Yeah, you spider phobias, check out the jumping spiders. You will soon love jumping spiders. They are just adorable. Let's see. Anybody comments or things we want to share? It's taken me 20 minutes to get a spider out of my shower. Yeah. Tony, would you mind commenting? I'm curious, what is it about frogs that scares you? I find them one of the ones that's just hard to fear. They're so adorable, but there are a lot of people out there who freak out because of frogs. What else do we have on here? Lynn,
because they jump. I wonder if it's because they suddenly jump.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. There actually is a horror movie. We didn't even talk about that role. And if people want to comment in the time we have left, I always want to do a Halloween wildlife horror festival because we talked a little, squishiness. So Tony says it's squishiness that frogs. Okay, fair enough. They are squishy. I'll give you that. But I think, we talked a little bit about Jaws, but there's a whole host of horror movies about animals that, killer bees. Remember when us Gen Xers remember The Swarm? I was terrified of African bees coming to America and killing us all. There actually is a horror movie called Frogs. Arachnophobia. I'm sure I was a little old for it to affect me, but I mean, if you're seeing that as a kid, what are some other horror movies people remember? Because that is probably another thing that played on our fears, much like Jaws. Griff, do you have any of those? Or
there was Birds back in the day, and then bats are often given scary roles, which is so unkind, because they're amazing, cool animals that have just been abused and abused and abused because of like weird, just weird cultural trips that we have about bats that we definitely need to get over. Because they're cool animals. Even vampire bats aren't like flying around like, oh, there's somebody, I'm gonna go bite their neck. They're like creeping out at night, and they're just like, they have this like numbing thing in their saliva, and they just barely cut the animal, and they lick the blood, and the animal doesn't even know they were there. So it's like, where did all this scariness around bats come from? And wolves too. Like, how much cultural lore is there about werewolves and all this kind of stuff, and then how many actual wolf attacks have there been? So it's like we have a lot of like cultural things that make us afraid. And I think a lot of it goes really, really, really far back, because there was a time, if you were a Paleolithic person, if you were just like one of the first Native Americans that came in North America, like there was the American lion here, there was scimitar cats, saber-toothed tigers, there was short-faced bears and dire wolves. Like there were things that ate people. So I think that a lot of our cultural fears of some predators go back to that time, and those animals are extinct now, and I don't think it's a coincidence. And now we have these apex predators that we need to stop being afraid of, because they're essential for a healthy functioning ecosystem. And right now we're messing all of our ecosystems up. So we need all the apex predators we can get. So we need to learn how to deal with them. We need to learn about these things. If you're scared of bears, then research them. If you're scared of mountain lions, research them. Bats, research spiders, research snakes, research frogs, research.
Tony, you hear that? But it's true. I mean, wolves are, and John, Griff, you and I will have to do a show on wolves, because I think there is perhaps no better example of an animal that incites on either side of the spectrum, hatred or love. I mean, that's one that is really, and it gets at, on both sides of the spectrum, something, deep. It's not just, like a spider can bite me, so I'm scared of it. So yeah, let's we've been trying to think of a next show to do, and I think wolves might be a good one. Somebody put up Tremors. Thank you. Yes, one of my favorites, filmed here in California on the east side. They did make worms surreal, and I have to admit, I don't drive by the Alabama hills without thinking about the possibility of giant worms and Kevin Bacon. So, yeah. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, here's a good one by Gabriel. Again, we didn't talk about bees, and there are, obviously for bees, there is some good reason for some people to fear if you are deathly allergic to bees. But as Griff knows, and first, native bees, which you should do your best to cultivate, are not aggressive. Most of them don't hive, right? So native bees, you should enjoy them. They're beautiful, like carpenter bees, and they rarely sting. The European honeybees and obviously the African bees are the ones that are not native to here and are the ones that are a little more aggressive, that hive in big numbers. What should you do if you happen upon a wild beehive? I actually don't know the answer to that except for get away. Griff, is that something when you were doing your wild job series? Like when you do see a big beehive, well, obviously this will be non-native or European bees, there are ways to remove them, right?
Yeah, that was actually one of the episodes I did, was removing beehives with this, I forgot his name, but he was like this guy who just whole life was about bees. He had bees in his truck, he had bees in his house, he had bees everywhere. And he would rescue bees. So people thought that he was rescuing them for bees, but he was really there to rescue the bees. And then he would raise them and then he would rent them out. So yeah, if you have I have an uncle who's deathly allergic to bees, and so like I don't think he should run barefooted through the fields, in shorts. You just want to be equipped. It's like all things. Like I tell people, like, you don't have to be afraid, you just have to be prepared. You don't have to be scared, you just got to be informed. And you can make a decision. Like, we don't need fear to avoid things. Sometimes it's helpful, but once you say, I'm allergic to bees, and you see a swarm of bees, and just, don't go over there, just use your common sense.
Yeah.
And, but appreciate them from afar. I'm afraid of sharks too. And I'm right there with you. I'm so afraid of sharks that I would love to go in the ocean and have my octopus teacher experience right now, but I never will, because I'd be too afraid about my shark teacher wanting to teach me a lesson. Like, I got a lesson for you. And I always figure that in wild jobs, they're always like, okay, well, we're going to do an aquarium episode. And I'd be like, well, nope. I hope. Because they'll be like, this is a shark, it never bit anybody. And then I would get in there and the shark would be like, no, I've been waiting for you. But, sharks are different. But I know that the chances of getting bit by a shark in the ocean are less than getting hit by a car on the street. It still doesn't help me when I get in the water, though.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's important to recognize. Somebody put up there that phobias are by definition irrational. So for me, it's about recognizing that. And like you, I still, I don't know that I could swim with the sharks, but I'm also not advocating for killing them. And I think that's where, we can live and respect. We all have irrational fears or even rational fears, but it's also about being able to appreciate these wild animals, even if we still have pause, right? And not, and educating people so people aren't advocating for all sharks to be killed or pick your animal. Same thing with bees. Like, we do not want a world without bees. We wouldn't have a lot of food. So, recognizing that, of course, like you said, being prepared if you are someone who's deathly allergic, but we don't want to be killing every bee or every insect we see. So I think that for me, that's it. And I hope we took some of you on a journey. We want you to appreciate these magical encounters. We want to be able to coexist with wildlife. And part of that is getting over some of these even legitimate fears, right? And so that we can have fun in the wild world, right? Any other comments before we leave? I know we're a couple minutes over time. Griff, how about some parting last words of wisdom? I know you can bring it home in a way that no other can. You said
now I better.
Well, one of the things Griff, if you haven't checked out, Griff is also a big dancer, and if you Google John Griffith dances with his dance corps members, I think the Huffington
Boss dances like a boss.
Yeah, he went viral for learning this great dance move. But what he did was create this BioBlitz dance. You can also Google. And yeah, you talked about drawing an animal to sort of demystify it. I think dance is another great way to do that. You created this incredible dance that celebrates the wild world by making some animal moves that I love. So bring it home with some closing words of wisdom for why animals shouldn't frighten us.
Well, you know, I think that one of the things I often think, I'm going to go back to, I call myself a fire ape, but like, I think about how humans evolved for hundreds of thousands, whatever years, in small groups with this really close connection to nature. Like, we knew what plants were poisonous, we knew what animals were venomous, we knew tracks, we knew smells, we knew signs, and we had this really intimate relationship with nature. And, you know, and it was even part of our spiritualities. And I feel like we don't really want a sterile nature. We don't really want a nature without predators. We don't want total control, not in a healthy way. We want there to be things that we have to be aware of. We want to hike in a place that has risks. And we want to feel like we're part of the planet. And I feel like the fear that was driven, especially by Western cultures, to dominate nature went way too far. And so now it's time for us to come back and realize we don't want a sterile nature. We want mountain lions. We want wolves. We want spiders. We want snakes. People are like, we do. But we really do, because we want to live in a world that keeps us present. And a little bit of being aware of what your surroundings are and being informed keeps you in the present moment. Otherwise, you're just kind of stuck in the past and the future, and that's not a good place to be. Or you're in a sterile nature, and the only thing you want sterile in your life is your kitchen counter.
Especially these days, right? And
especially these days.
If LA can live with a mountain lion, and they live with it because they want a connection to the wild world in one of the most improbable places, I argue anybody, you know, what's your excuse anywhere else, right? I mean, I think anything's possible. So, Griff, thanks for being here. Listen, we will be doing another one. Griff and I are thinking up other topics. You can check out Griff's book, Totem Mat, and I know my wonderful Tony will post a link. You can get his book on Amazon. You can check out When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors by me, and my new book, I Heart Wildlife. It's a guided activity journal that will walk you through some connections. But for both Griff and I, please email us, message us questions, and we'll release. We'll have to. I'm thinking wolves, but you and I can talk, Griff, on what our next topic will be. But thanks for being here with us today. We hope you had a wonderful holiday week, and we hope this got you to think a little bit about some animals that might frighten you and how you can get over that fear. And please send us success stories, right, Griff? We want to hear if you were successful in getting over some of the animals that might have given you pause before.
Please work on it.
Yeah. And I'll let you know if I'm ever able to swim with sharks. I don't know. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Bye.